Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining for this media briefing and update. I am Lisa Lord. We will be addressed this evening by Prime Minister the Honorable Mia Amor Motley, as well as the Director of the Barbados Met Services, Mr. Sabu Best, who is joining virtually. Now, the Minister of Home Affairs, Information and Public Affairs, the Honorable Wilfred Abrams, the Minister of Transport, Works and Water Resources, the Honorable Ian Gooding-Edgell, and the Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, Dr. William Duguid, are also present to answer any questions. We will begin with the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Good evening to all Barbadians. I did expect to come and speak to you today, but I did not expect that I would be speaking to you today on the topic which I'm now doing. And let me say at the outset that I anticipate that Minister Jeffrey Bostic and myself will be addressing you in the next 2-3 days on COVID-related matters. But as all Barbadians know by now, just after 12:31 last night, most of us who don't sleep lightly or who were not sleeping, I was reading cabinet papers, all of a sudden were showered with what can only be described as a freak event. I don't think in my life I've ever seen so much lightning. And indeed, it is only this afternoon when others have expressed that we were getting 490 lightning strikes per minute. And we had, over the period of time, almost 46,290 strikes based on what was collected. And there was a roaring of thunder, which was unusual, not the typical claps of thunder that we were accustomed to, but a roaring that was coming almost from the belly of the earth. And then, of course, high winds. And in the middle, the Met Office would have issued a high wind warning immediately as it started. I have with me this evening, Mr. Sabu Best, who is the head of the Met Office, and I really want to ask him to start before I address you fully, because the question that I was asked by many Barbadians today was what happened and how we didn't know about it. We normally know that a hurricane is coming or a storm is coming, or well, we knew that there was likely to be bad weather and tropical wave, but none of us expected this. And Mr. Best, if I can pass over to you, and I'll ask you one or two questions because I think the country needs to hear from you. I am not a meteorologist, but I would certainly like you to share with them briefly what you shared with me as to what happened last night. Thank you. Mr. Best?
Thank you, Prime Minister, and good afternoon to everyone in Barbados. Yes, thanks for the introduction, Prime Minister, and I'll just go over briefly what actually transpired during the night, which I know would have alarmed a lot of Barbadians. As of yesterday evening, the Met Office, we actually issued a excess rainfall be aware notification. This was actually on our website and on our mobile app for the possibility of excess rainfall, which is we forecasted only about an inch of rain. But around, let's say, 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or so in the night, we noticed what in meteorology, what we call a mesoscale convective system, a very small vortex that developed to our east-northeast, and we were keeping our eye on. Now, the thing about these systems, most of the time, they're very short-lived. And its distance at the time was 150 to 200 kilometers away to our east-northeast or so. And so we were watching it closely throughout the night and contemplating the most appropriate time to actually issue a warning, knowing the fact that it will be in the middle of the night. Hence, that's why we actually issued the be aware notification earlier on. Now, as it got within 100 kilometers and 75 kilometers of our shorelines on the east, we actually begin to start our early preparation for warnings and stuff. But again, because of the nature of these systems, they tend to just sometimes just disappear. And so I know the public are sometimes aware of when we actually issue these warnings or watches and then nothing happens. Some of the times is when these very small features which just appear on satellite or radar imagery and they just disappear. And so we did issue the warning when the feature was just about 25 kilometers off our east coast for excessive rainfall and severe lightning or severe thunderstorm activity. These messages would have gone out on our mobile app and also on CAP. albeit I agree these messages went out when the feature was just on our shores. But what's unprecedented here, what people well love our citizens to understand is that these features, because they're very small in nature, can spin up really quickly and they can disappear just as quick. And so all of the none of them actually detected or forecast this to actually happen. And so it was actually our pure skill from monitoring this feature throughout the entire night to actually track it and issue the warnings just before it actually come on shore. Now, I have to say that, I'm just going to read off some data that we collected from some of the stations across the island. The heavier impacted areas of Barbados was mostly central parts. We're talking from St. Peter, St. Andrew, St. Thomas, northern parts to a great extent, St. Michael, St. James, St. Thomas, St. Joseph, and St. John, and most parts of St. George. Rainfall accumulations of 4 to 5 inches, in some cases close to 6 inches, actually occur within a space of 2 hours. That's intense rainfall. Actually, our station at Cambridge in St. Andrew recorded rainfall rates of 168 millimeters per hour, and that's very intense. So I can understand the frustration sometimes that comes with these systems, but where we live in the tropics, these really small convective systems can develop really quickly. And that's why it's essential that we all, especially during the hurricane season, be ready for these really sudden onsets that just can come out of nowhere and just give you heavy downpours and strong winds for a very short period of time. You would have noticed that for most parts of the island, it probably lasts about an hour and a half. The western side probably drag along to about 2 hours, but it was a very short-lived event. It was not a tropical storm. It was not a hurricane. It was just a feature attached to the tail end of the wave that passed earlier during the night. So the wave axis itself passed about early in the evening, and then this feature came in behind the wave. So it is an unusual event. It's truly what you call a freak event because of its size and the very short duration and suddenness of the actual event. I have to also point out, now I touched on the size. What we were pouring over the data today from the radar and all the stations we have on the ground and satellite imagery, etc. And we did manage to confirm that there was a low-level vortex. And by vortex, what I'm referring to is just like a storm or hurricane that rotates and spins. There was a very small low associated with this feature. And it was so tiny that it actually fit comfortably within the middle of the island. And so in terms of its wind field, so St. Lucie and those in you who live in southern parts of Christchurch, Oistins area, Hastings area, you probably would have noticed any rainfall, hardly any rainfall. As a matter of fact, the rainfall totals for those sections was less than 10 millimeters or so. And that's nothing compared to what would happen in the center, western section, and eastern sections of the island. Now, because of this very small feature, you can understand the difficulty, one, forecasting its track, forecasting the intensity, and also, and by extension, forecasting the impacts you're likely to have. So for going on from here in the future, I can understand people would be wondering, what can they do or what can we do to actually help detect these things before they come? Now, like I said, most of the time, we will actually issue a special message out there, mostly on our website and our app, that actually turns the alert level from green to yellow. And that message was up from yesterday afternoon, indicating the possibility of excess rainfall. This alert message was on our website, like I said, and on the app. But we will look for other ways to continue to improve this communication so that more and more public can be aware of it. The app, like I said, is freely available from our website. You can download it. It alerts you. It talks to you. It literally talks to you and tell you what's actually going on. Outside of that, like there's a cap.cap, which is another official source of getting these alerts. So I encourage all persons out there, get equipped with these warning tools, and it will put all of us in a really good position to be well aware of these situations before they actually occur. Now,
Sabu,
I just
if we can, because you and I both know, and we hear you on the technicalities, and we appreciate that. And I think that you're going to have to talk the country through these things on an ongoing basis. But today, a lot of damage happened. And when I say a lot, let me contextualize it more than we were happy with. It could have been a lot worse. I'll come to the details of the damage in a minute. But one of the things that you have advised us is that there is a risk of continued bad weather. Would you be so kind as to share with the public what you are seeing and what we need to be monitoring over the next few days and over the between now and the end of the month? Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you for that. And Prime Minister, if I may add, perhaps go beyond the month too, because I think it's important that we not lose sight of the hurricane season and where we're actually heading to. But yes, we are in the hurricane season. And from time to time, every 2 or 3 days, we're going to have these tropical waves passing through. There's sometimes they may pass unnoticed. There's sometimes to give us nice showers. There's sometimes to give us a lot. And so what we are seeing from the guidance is there is another tropical wave that's due to pass through and give us some showers and rain again on Saturday night going into Sunday. Following that, there's another wave that's due to come in late on Tuesday. Now, this does not mean that you're going to get the same kind of wicked, intense activity you got last night. However, what I would urge Barbadians to do with us, monitor what we actually issue as a day-to-day basis is essential, because it changes on a day-to-day basis. As a matter of fact, it changes even on a sub-level of a day-to-day basis. And it's imperative that we all living in the tropics, in the hurricane season, pay special attention. Now, as it stands, there's no indication that you're going to get a repeat of what we had last night, because that is a freak event. That is just extraordinary, full stop. But if we see anything looking just like that before, we will all, just like that before last night, that is, we will, just like yesterday, issue a yellow alert indicating to persons to just be aware of an impending situation. I just want to add on, just not because of what's happened this month, because it appears we are on a uptick or trending for increased precipitation as we go on in the next 10 to 14 days. So we can expect more and more rain. That heavy downpour has pretty much saturated a lot of areas. And so any further inch or two of rain on that can easily flood a lot of locations. So there's no need to panic. We've been through this like last year with all those excessive rainfall events. We just have to be vigilant, keep around our communities and stuff clean and drainage unblocked. But going outside of June, where we're heading to the rest of the year, we're moving, not to be too technical, but we're moving into the time of the year or the season which is expected to be more conducive for heavy rain, full stop. And so from what we've been seeing from the work we've been doing with CNMH and our deterministic model runs, is that especially coming into August and September, we are seeing even more peaks of rainfall coming. So building our resilience is not just about building it for the near term, it's building it for months down the road. We have to be ready and be prepared for what's to come. But like I said, the Prime Minister, what's to come so far is no indication that it's going to be like last night. But if that does happen, which is a freak event, the odds or chance of that happening again is very, very slim.
Thank you, Sabu. And in simple terms, simple language, we need Barbadians to be vigilant over the next few days. Obviously, when rain comes, the water will cause the ground to be saturated. And at some point, if the rain continues, clearly we're going to have difficulties. And let us put this in context. I still want to give thanks this evening. It could have been far worse. And even as we reflect, there are those brothers and sisters we have in the region, in Guyana, for example, with the floods that they've had there that were very, very, very horrific and have affected so many. In our case today, I want to carry you through where the losses have been. Regrettably, the system occasioned a loss of power in large parts of the north of the island, and also loss of water. In the most part, I'm being informed that 75 to 80% of the power has been restored by the Barbados Light and Power, and the Water Authority has been working assiduously to get back water to most of the key areas that have been affected. With respect to the actual damage, and I think that there is some footage that they can start to show you while I tell you. Earlier in the day, before we went on the road, I would have spoken about the fallen trees. Where we're looking at now is in Fruitful Hill Lower Parks, really. And the Attorney General has in St. Joseph, he would have reported to me because he did a separate tour from me, 18, but we were together in Lower Parks and Fruitful Hill. As you can see there, 3 houses, one completely damaged, beyond any form of being able to rescue and repair. And the other 2 houses also had serious roof damage, and the people are working to be able to get it together. We also would have seen serious damage in parts of St. Lucie, in Trent St. Lucie, another house completely lost, incapable. In fact, that one was particularly sad because his house had been damaged in Thomas and regrettably had never been repaired by the government, and he tried to do as best he can, and then of course he's lost it now again in St. Lucie. And that's it there that we've just seen there with the roof completely off in the middle of the house and almost pure damage there. The one that we're looking at now is in Orange Hill. Mr. Bishop there, and his story was heart-wrenching again. This is an elderly gentleman, although he's very sprightly, I must tell you, and move very sprightly, but a senior citizen who lives alone and would have had to come out to the back of the house and make his way in the middle of the storm, and made his way to his neighbor opposite, with whom he was able to spend the rest of the period of time, both during the storm and into the morning, because he has nothing to go back to now, as you can see. So that's completely destroyed. We would have gone from there to Mount All, part of White Hill. I'm not sure you can see fully the damage on that house there, but basically, look at the side there, you can see the roof off on the side. The house had straps even before the system, but what would have happened was a situation where the chicken pens, fowl pens, literally cut the straps, and therefore once the straps were cut, the roof started to move off. And there were other houses damaged also in White Hill, and there was a fallen tree up there as well. We moved from there to Glen Burnie, and at Glen Burnie we saw 2 houses damaged. In fact, this one that you're looking at now, the damage is even more complete because it's not just roof damage, but it is foundation damage, and they're incapable of going back into that house at this point. And there was another house where on the hill, and Minister Duguid was very clear in pointing out and reflecting, as we did, that in most instances where we were seeing serious damage, like the house that we're seeing there now, that it was as a result of houses being on the cliff, and therefore how the wind took to the roof just made it peel off, like if you're peeling sweetie paper off of a sweetie. We moved from there to Martins Bay, and I think that when you go there, you will see that right opposite the water, there was serious damage there in Martins Bay. And we moved from Martins Bay to Zores. What you're actually looking at now is the one in Zores, not in Martins Bay. And once again, the gentleman there is lucky to be alive, because once the wind blew the glass, it literally pushed him against the wall inside, and he had to flee the house and could only return once the system was finished. We moved from there to Bayfield, and in Bayfield, once again, persons had to move out, elderly persons had to move in the middle of the storm, and even after they moved, some of the roof, because when we got there this afternoon, as you can see, most of the tarpaulin has gone on to be able to at least secure the property. What we are also aware, a couple houses down, the roof that blew off, damaged other houses, and then of course the light pole came down. Once the electricity came back on, there was a lot of sparks too, so a number of people had to flee during the night, and thank God they were able to do so to their neighbors in order to secure themselves. And the last one that I visited today was in Long Bay. But the truth is that there are many more houses that we're not showing you. And if I can come back, therefore, to where we stand. People went to sleep last night not expecting this. And regrettably, this is part of the world in which we live. I know that very often we speak as a government about the climate crisis, and sometimes, well, that's that esoteric thing that the government talking about or the Prime Minister talking about. It's not esoteric. This is real. And as a result, we have to continue to be able to change how we build, change how we protect ourselves, and do all of these things. But in the immediate today, what is the message? We've gone literally and tried to reach out to every single house that has been reported as damaged to the Department of Emergency Services. Minister Duguid and the Ministry of Housing has been literally on the road all day with us, and they will work with the UDC and RDC. The work has started. In fact, I think a number of people have already received materials. In some instances, people just want materials. In some instances, we have to do the repairs. In some instances, we have houses completely lost. And therefore, it is a case of ensuring that persons can have somewhere to stay, while at the same time ensuring that we can rebuild. We know that there is a problem in the country with lack of sufficient insurance. Indeed, it is why the government of Barbados in November 2019 started the process of being able to see how we can better work with reinsurers overseas to make insurance more affordable for many of our citizens, because many people just simply don't insure because they can't afford to insure. But the world in which we live, where we are on the front line of the climate crisis, these are the conversations we're going to have, and we are going to have to work with our insurers to see how best we can have complete coverage where possible. In the absence of that coverage, we've seen damage. We've seen damage to the houses I've just pointed out to you. DEM has at least 28 houses, and in St. Joseph, now the majority of them have not come in yet, because there was a separate list on that, and that was another 18 or so houses. We have some schools that were affected as well. Grantley Adams School reported some level of damage, and we certainly saw the photographs there. We also saw some damage at Lodge School in terms of rain and flooding, and I'm told just in one or two classrooms, limited. Allen School's damage related more to fallen trees, etc. on the compound, and I'm not sure whether this is St. George Primary or St. George Secondary, but there was a report of damage there too. I spoke to you earlier today, as I said, about the roads that were impassable as a result, and I'm happy to report that most of these roads have been cleared. I'd like to thank the roving response team. We don't thank them enough. In my view, this is a group of persons who continue to come to the needs of this country whenever there are difficulties, and I want to thank them because they would have even started from during the night, far less this morning, when the public officials all mobilized and were fully on the road. I want to thank the Ministry of Public Works and their team, and those persons from the civil contractors who also would have helped them. We had fallen trees, Cretton, Bagatelle, Dairy Meadows, Greenwich Village, Orange Hill, Porters in St. James, St. Albans in St. James, Auburn, St. Joseph, White Hill, St. Andrew, Canefield, St. Thomas, First Avenue, Carlton, St. James, John Beckles Drive in Town, Prout, St. Thomas, Laybridge in St. Joseph, Todd's Corner, Lakes in St. Andrew, Mullins in St. Peter, Chimborazo, St. Joseph, Hillaby, St. Andrew, Chalky Mount, Mellows Hill in St. Joseph, Sailor Gully in St. Peter, The Rock in St. Peter, and believe you me, and then a number of other roads, Bloomsbury, St. Thomas, Lion Castle to Stone Gurley, Sturgis, St. Thomas, Mount Wilton, St. Thomas, St. Bernard's, Blackman's Tenantry, Brucevale. Blackman's Tenantry, Brucevale, Belplain, and Lakes all had some elements of mudslide. And I can assure you that, believe you me, as we moved across the country, there were clear areas where there were levels of mudslide and mud and ash, and made the roads actually quite treacherous to travel on. And I'd like to urge Barbadians, because MTW has been able to remove blockages, but they have to continue tomorrow and into the weekend in terms of cleaning the roads and trying to make sure that they are not treacherous. We also had debris as opposed to fallen trees at Sion Hill in St. James, Rockdundo in St. James, Durance Village in St. James. And then we had some issues that required us to clear the outfalls. The one that, of course, we've seen appreciable improvement in is the Salt Pond in St. Peter. The work has not finished there. We have been undertaking a project with the Caribbean Development Bank, and of course it could have been far worse, but I suspect that the work that we've done both at Salt Pond and in Murphy's Pasture in Bridgetown, we all know that Bridgetown has serious issues because a lot of the water in the watershed comes down into Bridgetown in addition to the water that comes there. And I'm happy to report that even though we've not completely finished Murphy Pasture, what we've done there with the retention pond and what we've done with the widening of the canal literally ensured that we do not have them to count as persons who have been seriously affected by this issue. Same thing with Wotton and Christchurch. I'm told that the retention pond there seemed to have been working, and in Map Hill in St. Michael. My friends, the reality is that in all of this, we continue now to have to find the means to make sure that our people do not walk alone. This has been a difficult 18 months starting from January 2020, and we all know it, from the pandemic to the ashfall that hit us at the beginning of April, and to this event, which is a freak storm. I think that Mr. Best would have indicated that we had winds as high as 43, 45 kilometers, and clearly those houses where the roofs have not been fully strapped down would therefore have been the most vulnerable, and as I indicated earlier, those on cliff edges without anything to protect them. We will continue to work with the residents and the persons who have been affected. We know that people are still calling in, believe you me, into the DEM. I'm talking about houses, but I can't even begin to paint the picture of the loss of beds, the loss of couches, the loss of everything that people have. And to that extent, therefore, our heart continues to go out to them. But more importantly, I say to them again, having told many of them already myself, you shall not walk alone. Those persons who can help themselves are willing to do so. Those who need help. And that's the beautiful thing about this country, that in this country, as I went through from St. Lucie to St. Peter to St. Joseph to St. Andrew to St. John to St. Philip today, the one common thread was what? That you gotta learn to live good with one another. Because in every instance, people were rescued, and people said, boy, I live good with, or the people said we had to go for them. And that sense of community spirit, that sense of fraternity, that sense of sisterhood and brotherhood is literally what would have saved many people last night. And I can't even contemplate the level of fear, because as I looked out of my bedroom window and seeing the constant flashing, I could only think about those who would have had to face the elements because of their roofs. And it is for that reason, why the government retains its position that the major transformational project that we want in a world that is being affected by the climate crisis is our Roofs to Reefs program. And I go back to it, please. In 1955, when Janet hit us, we had a situation where the south of the island was seriously badly damaged, and we lost many roofs. The older people tell me that we developed a new character called a storm carpenter, because we did not have enough carpenters to fix roofs at the time. As a result of that, we got into the habit of building flat roof houses with long overhang. We've been saying, and we've luckily had some sessions in October 2019 where we had a national consultation on changing how we do roofs in this country, and also in encouraging those whose roofs can be strengthened to either get the hurricane straps, to shorten the overhang, and wherever possible, if you need to replace the roofs, let us do so, because we fear that should Barbados be hit by a real hurricane of category 1 or category 2, particularly category 2, that we will have significant roof damage in this country. The reefs, and I didn't speak to you about the coastal damage, but the coastal zone unit has reported as well that we had 2 vessels that broke their moorings. In fact, I saw a picture of one that had washed up off of Maxwell Coast Road, and there was another one that was on the west coast that also broke its moorings. Of course, the other consequence of the climate crisis is upon us too, and we've had bad sargassum inflows, especially in the last week, 10 days, and that has compounded it. I'm told as well that the beach loss has been fairly severe at Beachy Head and Ginger Bay in St. Philip. So all in all, we are going to continue to have to assess the volume of damage. We're going to have to be able to help those who need the assistance. This is the country, this is who we are. We've said it over and over. And I want to say that what brought joy to my heart more than anything else, today I saw destruction of people's homes. They lost everything in some instances. But what I saw was a spirit that was resilient and joyful. Still, they gave thanks that their lives were saved. They gave thanks that in spite of it all, that they felt that they could come again. And Mr. Bishop in particular talked about Noah's Ark, and I'm sure that when you see his interview on CBC, you will be as touched as I was by the spirit of this Barbadian senior citizen who, in the midst of no electricity, thunder at 400 and how much it is, strikes, 490 strikes per minute, walking with a stick, came out on his own, braved the elements, and literally said, "This is not going to take me down." And it is that kind of spirit that makes me proud to be the leader of this country, because I know that I can't promise you that things will not happen, but I promise you that when they do, we will stand together as one and we will fight it. And I know that there are horror stories that we're still dealing with, people who were left after Thomas, still waiting for assistance after Thomas. And I don't have eyes in the back of my head, but I give you the assurance that we may not be able to do everything that people would like, but we're going to do as much as people need as we can. And for that, I want therefore to thank the ministers. I don't think many of us slept last night, and we certainly have not eaten for the day. And it has been a long day, but we are intent on trying to ensure that we cover as many roofs as possible and we protect as many people as possible, given what Mr. Best has told us, given what Sabu has told us about the likelihood, potentially, of more rain on Saturday night into Sunday and on Tuesday. Let's pray that it doesn't happen. And I know they've got a lot of prayer warriors out there, and I ask you to push up the prayers. But by the same token, we have to be ready in the event that it happens. And therefore, if we know, and what is not making front page today is the many, many houses where the leaks are significant and people's beds or different parts of their house or property have been destroyed. We understand it all. Those who have been affected, the Statistical Service and the Welfare Department are doing the social surveys to ensure that the government can act with certainty, with transparency, but with empathy and with speed. Because without empathy and speed, I regret that we put these persons who have been affected at the front line once again. I want to simply say that we will continue to work with the utility companies to make sure that the remaining districts that are affected can be resolved as soon as possible. And basically, all hands on deck. All hands on deck. One Barbados, one people, one set of us affected, but we are at the beginning of the hurricane season. There was a time when we used to say June too soon, July stand by. Well, June wasn't too soon today. July, I'm not sure that we can say stand by anymore, because what we're hearing, July may be difficult. August, a month, September, remember, October, all over, not no more. We're into November. And regrettably, this year, it started in May. So that we've added 2 months to the hurricane season. And it's ironic because yesterday I did a session with the managing director of the International Monetary Fund and the Minister of Finance from Madagascar. They are the largest island in the world. We are one of the smallest islands in the world. But where we all stood is that we understood that this climate crisis is not going to make things better. It's going to make it more difficult until the world resolves to try to halt the damage and, if possible, to turn back the clock. And that's why I am more, I want to see more young Barbadians take up the cause to help us be part of a global movement to be able to protect us on these climate issues because they're real. But today is not the day for that kind of long talk. Today is the day to let you know that we've had an event. We're with you. We will walk with you. We will continue to make sure that we can minimize the exposure of persons over the next few days. And we ask one another in communities, in families, to look out and to take care of each other as we go forward. Are there any questions at this stage? I'll pause. And as I said earlier, three ministers here. Ministers Abrams, Minister of Home Affairs, Minister Duguid, Housing and Maintenance, Minister Goodinedgel, Transport, Public Works and Maintenance. I know that I left out deliberately one road that has not been cleared, and that is at Melvin's Hill, St. Joseph. And I think Minister Goodinedgel, if necessary, will tell you how the Transport Board also, if there are any questions on that, they've had to reroute on that area, I think, for going to Chalky Mount. But basically, we are available to answer any questions related to what transpired today and where we're going.
Thank you, Prime
Lisa,
Minister.
thank
And
you.
as we go to members of the media, joining us are Barry Allen from Nation News. We have Ryan Broom, CBC, Kezia Innes, Starcom Network, Kerry Gooden, Loop News, Cara Jean-Baptiste, The Barbados Advocate, and Kareem Smith from Barbados Today.
Good evening, Prime Minister. Barry Allen here from the Nation. Last night's event, a freak event, though unfortunate, may have worked out to be a perfect systems response test for our readiness later on this month should a natural disaster occur. Can you give us an indication as to how good or bad our system response was between last night and the early hours of this morning and into today?
Thank you. I wouldn't say that it was perfect, but it's significantly better than what it has been in the last 2 to 3 years. And I think I started earlier to point out that the work that we're doing, the infrastructural work that we're doing, is paying dividends by being able to minimize the level of flooding. I'm happy with, for the most part, not perfect because I'm a hard taskmaster for myself, far less anybody else. But I'm happy for the most part with the general response of the agencies as we were in the field today, when we were in Orange Hill, when we were in St. Andrew at Mount All. We saw the various persons going to take the information for the damage assessments that will allow us to be able to do things in an orderly way. We also, as I said, we had the roving team moving from before dawn. I think Ms. Hines from the DEM can confirm that for us, as well as all of the private and public persons were available early this morning, first on calls on Zoom, and then we met again at the DEM office before taking off. We do need to tighten a few more things, and we need to have, I believe Minister Abrams is still having some closing meetings with the utility companies and ensuring that we can protect, but with the best will in the world. Name me a storm or a hurricane that don't take out utilities. I was in Gilbert in Jamaica, and I know what it is to, from the Sunday to the Thursday, to be in a house that had no water before I left, to watch cars line up for gasoline for an hour and a half before they could get to the pump. So you really don't know, but I'm reasonably comfortable. But this allows us, as you so aptly said, to go and sharpen the pencil again and say, look, we feel we can do better here, we feel we can do better there, we are satisfied with X or Y.
A quick question for Minister Abrams following up that, Prime Minister. Minister Abrams, the government over the last 18 months or so would have done a level of infrastructural work to mitigate a lot of physical damage when certain events occur, like the one that did last night. Are you satisfied that those infrastructural changes would have held up for the most part and would have worked? Because there were some reports, especially from whole town, about some level of flooding. So if you could just tell the country from an infrastructural context where we stand.
Barry, the person who can actually better answer that than me is the minister responsible for public works, Minister Ian Gooden-Edgell. So I'll actually turn that question over to him.
Thank you very much. Yes, the government of Barbados undertook a number of infrastructural projects within the Holtong area. In addition to that, the Drainage Division continues to clean the outfalls in that general area. That has alleviated some flooding. As you're also aware, as part of the Highway 1 upgrade project, the government not only installed footpaths, but also instituted certain drainage infrastructure improvements in the area, which has led to some decreased flooding in that general area.
Minister, thank you. But what about today? Did the infrastructure hold up today?
Yes, it did. There are no major breaks in our infrastructure. Again, along the same Holtong area, there's been no breakage whatsoever. And the outfall, we continue to clean the outfalls on a regular basis, and it has maintained just behind the Sunset Crest area where we dam water, thanks to some technical cooperation that we received earlier. That also held up in that general area.
Thank you.
Ryan Broom here, CBC News. Minister Gooden-Edgell, just a question on the cleanup process. I have questions here from Melvin Hill and St. Joseph. What is the timeline now? Is it possible to give a timeline yet in terms of when that area will be able to be cleared? There are a number of fallen trees in terms of the road area over there.
The MTW, along with the roving response team and a number of private contractors that we mobilize to assist us, are continuing to execute the works in that area. I can't give you a timeline. We are asking them to work around the clock to facilitate those critical changes that we need to do in that area to allow traffic to flow.
I also have a question in relation to school tomorrow. Obviously, today, the word notice would have gone out early that we would have only online school in cases where people could. But given the scope of the damage that we've seen today, how likely is any in-person school tomorrow? Are we likely to see a resumption of in online school for those who would be able to, given the restoration of power and so on?
I haven't had anything that would cause me to believe that school wouldn't take place tomorrow. I spoke to Minister Bradshaw earlier. I think I've only been able to identify 3 schools that were affected. Obviously, today you would have been further compromised by lack of electricity, lack of water, and a number of roads, especially in the north and the center of the island, that were closed, with the exception of Melvin's Hill. I think all the roads are now cleared here, and therefore there's no reason why a person shouldn't go. I think that the Minister of Education may have to make a judgment call about Grantley Adams. That's the only one. I think that's the worst of the schools. So be on standby for that. Honestly, I came straight here, so I've not been able to speak to her, but I have every reason to believe that if Grantley Adams can't do it, then she will issue a notice by the 7 p.m. news. Okay?
Hi, good night. Okay, I know Minister Ford isn't here with regards to beautification, but my 2 questions would be, some persons were concerned about the heat and bagged ash along the sides of the highways and the roads were left, and because of that, then when last night happened, it washed all into the road. If this is something that can be cleaned up more expeditiously, because many times there are heat and then no one comes and clears it for a couple of days, even weeks in some communities. And then the second thing is, will we be looking at doing some tree trimming around the island?
Thank you. Just for the benefit of all Barbadians, the Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources, along with the Ministry of the Environment, executed a cleanup campaign. As you are aware, we've moved over close to 40,000 bags of ash across the country. We are continuing with that program as we speak. Obviously, there are some areas where we are yet to remove all of the ash, but I think you would agree that the over 1,200 workers who continue to work in that program continue to make us all very proud of Barbadians in respect of the clean ash cleanup program. So yes, the MTW teams would continue to remove the ash from all of our roadways. In addition to that, I'll let you know that they're not only removing the ash from the roadways, they're also assisting at the direction of the head of each depot across the country, the 13 depots that we have. They are cleaning drains, culverts, as well as canals across Barbados. And that has brought some measure of relief to the flood mitigation measures already undertaken by the Drainage Division.
Thank you. I have a question for Sabu Best, the Director of Meteorology at the Barbados Meteorological Service. Mr. Best, you would have spoken about the significantly fast movement of this system after it was just over 150 or so kilometers from our coast. And then you spoke about our systems actually registering it in a very short space of time at 70 kilometers off. Would there be technology or equipment available to the BMS that would have put us in a better position to do so? Or was this just one of these things that would occur with such a freak vortex system that actually left you guys a little bit, I wouldn't want to say helpless, but a little bit behind the 8 ball?
Thanks for your question, Barry. No, well, first of all, no, we weren't behind the 8 ball, to be honest. These small mesoscale convective systems, although uncommon, mostly in the tropics, it's not impossible. When I mentioned that it was outside 150 kilometers, most of the time with these systems, they don't last like 6 hours, they just disappear. That's it. And so leading back to your question, if there are any equipment or things you can do to add to improve the systems, yes, there is. When we look back at where we were from the Met Office, let's say a year, 2 years ago, we've made improvements all along the way, huge improvements, additions to our equipment, our capabilities, training the staff, the expertise. We've made good improvements. There's always room for improvement, and there's room to look back at the scenario. Now that we have so much data that we've collected, to look back at the actual event, what happened, and this will call for some research upon the actual event. And need to learn about the science and learn what actually happened. And when you do that, then you can put in mitigation efforts to that would include, new observation systems, new techniques, different ways of issuing and handling warnings. That's how we actually evolve in meteorology.
Thank you. Wait, just a quick question, Sabu. Would the phenomenon we've been having with Sahara dust and the conditions emanating from the African West Coast, could that have exacerbated the forming of such a system and led to what we're going to see, or you guys are forecasting over the next few days?
No, thanks, Barry. No, it didn't. Actually, the converse is actually true. It actually, such large amounts of Saharan dust actually weaken convective systems. But the dust itself was behind the system, not embedded within it. So it wasn't actually playing a significant role at all within that system. So as you persons can probably notice outside, looks really hazy, and that haze will start to lift out slowly tomorrow, leading into the actual wave that comes in on Saturday evening, night or so.
Also have a question quickly from Mr. Best. I heard you talk about the system, the alert system, the amber and green. And I'm wondering if that might not also be better to get that in a traditional media setting. I already mentioned the app. But when we have those systems, if we have power outages, then if somebody doesn't have data, and if they're relying on Wi-Fi, then you would have a problem. I don't know how many people keep transistor radios and so on, but I'm just wondering if that might not be something that you would want to consider. And I know sometimes some people say, well, we didn't see anything. I know how that goes for the Met Office. But is that something that you might want to consider?
Thanks, Mr. Broom. Thanks. Appreciate your question. So I remember some time ago last year, at the beginning or just before the season, when we had this talk with the media, when we were introducing our impact-based forecasting that we started June the 1st. There are lessons that you will learn as we go along. Unfortunately, we should say it wasn't such a significant event. And I mean, it's really unfortunate what happened to so many homes and people's lives. It's really tragic, and it's sad, very, very sad to hear that. But as we go along, you just point out, and it just doesn't have to come from the Met Office. It comes from the media. It comes from the public. It comes from our ministry, ministers, everyone. Fantastic ideas, solutions. When we look at what we have in place and what could potentially be a problem going forward into the future, we look to actually mitigate that and enhance it, improve, or go along. So like I was saying before, I mean, last year or two, we've made some really significant strides going forward in what we do and improving what we do. But what you have identified could be a weakness. I mean, not just from the point of view of data. Let's look at a new line of weakness. It happened in the middle of the night when most of us were actually sleeping. And I must say, it could be the same thing if it was a tsunami. That's such very short event kind of feature or hazard, that can happen just like that in a few minutes. And it could happen in the middle of the night. And so those things we actually do think about. And so, I mean, working with the media, working with the public, we can look for solutions how to make that better.
Good evening. Kareem Smith from Barbados today. I also have a question for Mr. Best. And I mean, early on in your presentation, you would have pointed out that because of the period that we're in, the hurricane season, that we should be prepared for literally anything. But I found it very interesting that even some of the oldest persons among us have said that this is something that they have never ever seen. So I just wanted to find out from you, based on your expertise and perhaps even your work with the CIMH, if there's evidence to suggest that this is in fact something that could be linked to the changing climate in our world. And yeah, is this a feature of climate change, and is this something that we can expect more frequently?
Thanks for your question, Kareem. So the Barbados Met Office, we work very closely with CIMH in a lot of things, training, research, and pushing forward the science. And CIMH has been very, very helpful in helping to push science forward for the Met Office, and we are very grateful for that. But to answer your question about if it has a link with climate change, first, the features was really tiny, very small, and to actually try it to right off the bat to tie it to climate change or the fallout, I'll say, of climate change itself, we first need to actually look at the data, have a good look at it, and research over the data and make sure that what actually created it can we attribute that to climate change. Now, that's hard to say. It would be best to actually go over the data first, and that can take, I mean, a few months. Let's say years, but as per some more researchers go over data, we can learn a lot more from what actually happened. As to your question about if it actually happened before, I do remember there were instances, one in particular in Trinidad, where this actually did happen. There was a what we for short call an MSC, mesoscale convective system, that actually rolled through and did similar kind of damage. But they're not very frequent. It's a very uncommon thing. It even caught their service by surprise. Very short-lived and very small, and it rolls through very quickly. So there were, I can tell you from experience, there were events before, but they were not mesoscale convective systems. They were really intense convection thunderstorms, frequent lightning, way back in 1995. I remember that well because that's when I first started in my office, and unfortunately, that was when Kuru got washed away. That day was severe thunderstorm and lightning activity. Lightning was flashing like every single every second. That was intense, but that was not the same kind of setup dynamically. It was different. Okay, so but when you combine what happened, the winds, the lightning, heavy rainfall, really quick onset, and finish in an hour and a half. Yeah, that's pretty much from my recollection and memory. That's the first time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bass. And Prime Minister, would you like to close at this time?
Thank you. Somebody wanted to ask a question. I heard a voice. Who was it?
Yes, sorry, I just wanted to ask Mr. Best one quick question before you summarized. Mr. Best, even though there's a level of predictability with forecasting hurricanes and everything, there's also a high level of science that allows you guys to know what happens as a hurricane develops. But can you explain to the country what would have occurred physically that would have allowed this system to develop the way it did in such a quick time? Was there a spike in was there a reduction in ocean temperature? Was there a sudden high level of moisture absorption by the system? What physically and meteorologically could have occurred for this system to behave in the way it did in such a short space of time?
Thank you, Barry. I'm going to try my best not to be technical. I'm accused of always being a technical, so I'll try to be really simple. There was an abundance of moisture where the system was really, the vortex was actually developing. So moisture was not a question. And two, the upper level environment, just like for tropical storms, was conducive for deep convection, but not conducive for a tropical storm to develop. That's different. And on top of that, it was very tiny. Now, it is well known that very small systems, tiny like this, can actually spin up very quickly because of the small nature. They don't require a lot of energy. But the converse is also true. As quick as they can spin up, they can quickly spin down. I must mention that as soon as it passed Barbados, it just spin right down and just opened up. That's it. Just went and produced rain and stuff in St. Vincent, but no strong winds. So it just quickly spin up in front of Barbados to the east, give us those strong winds and heavy rains, and then spin right down as soon as it passes.
Thank you again, Mr. Best. Sorry, Kareem. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question for Minister Gooding Edgell as well. And again, the Prime Minister made mention of the area of Chapman Lane, but I recall just a few weeks ago, there were some challenges expressed by some of the residents down there about some of the drainage work that was taking place. Residents wanted to find out about timelines because there was a burst pipe in the area, I believe, and essentially the canal started to flood, and they're saying that at that point at least, there were these large heaps of debris and whatnot, which they believe, as the hurricane season progressed, could also be a hazard. You also had persons walking from one side of the community to the other on some small planks over this murky, dirty water. So I just wanted to find out from Minister Gooding Edgell whether he could update as to the timeline for that particular project.
Thank you, Kareem. What I can tell you and tell Barbadians is that the government approved a contractor who's on site. In addition to that, what we are doing is that we are installing a culvert in the general area that caused the Chapman Lane Road to be blocked. We expect to have the project completed in the shortest time possible. We've given a clear mandate to the contractors to get to work around the clock to expedite the works in the shortest possible time.
Thank you, Minister. Prime Minister?
Perhaps what Ian wants to also say to you, Kareem, is that thank God that we had the pond, the retention pond, and thank God we more than tripled the width and depth of the canal, because without that, we would be in serious trouble. And I think that, one of my greatest fears, I was about 5 years old when Bridgetown flooded in 1970. And I forever hear my father tell this story when he was Member of Parliament, that he was walking with a chap, well known, I don't know his real name, but his nickname was Dog Ears Batson. And that at one point he said, "Skipper, I can see you later," and started to swim his way down the streets. Now, that is our greatest fear in Bridgetown always. And it is for that reason that this government has taken the time to ensure that all three pumps, for the first time in God knows how long, decades, all three pumps at the pump house at Princess Alice are in fact working. We also ensured that we put in pumps in the Bayland and in Spikestown. So that, believe you me, from the very beginning, I think within 3 months of being in office, we had to deal with the first threat of a storm. And then, of course, we had Tropical Storm Kirk, which in fact did flood out in Edmonton and Chapman Lane and out that side. So we are not where we want to be, but we are getting there. And I hope and have every confidence that we will continue the work. There also is work for relocation of those houses that are on the very border of the canal, and once we move them as well, we're going to put a play park there and landscaping to make sure that nobody goes back and is put at serious risk in that particular area. I really want to give thanks as we close for the fact that we did not lose any lives, and this is always uppermost in our minds. In addition, that there were no serious injuries as a result of this system. It was a freak storm, and you've questioned Sabu and you've heard it fully. But the bottom line is we do have damage. We do have now expenditure that we didn't expect to have. We do have people who have lost everything, and we do have people who have been dislocated and are trying to save what little they can. And we want simply to say to the rest of Barbados, let us use this as an example. As I said, the thing that touched my heart the most was the fact that in all of this, people felt that they were able to be rescued or they were able to be comforted as a result of living good with people around them. And that is really the Barbadian spirit. And I pray that it will forever last. We also know, as however we said earlier, that this is just the beginning. June too soon. What a change. We now know that for the next few months we have to be vigilant, we have to be our brothers and sisters keeper, and we have to ensure that we are ready and have all of the things. Someone talked about a transistor radio. Yes, you do have transistor radios selling still. And yes, I would still get a transistor radio if I were you, just as you would get batteries and candles and tin food and all of the other things. And it is a good time to remind people that things like medication and personal documents, put them in a plastic bag from now, so that if the worst happens, we never know whether it is weather or an accident or a fire, that we're in a position to run with the medication and the personal documents that are most important to you and move. With that, I ask us please continue to be vigilant, pray for one another. I expect to speak to you in a few days' time with Minister Bostic with respect to the pandemic, because everything else is still going on. But even as we do this, yesterday I said to you that we were having these discussions, but we didn't expect to be here, and I really expected to be here talking to you about COVID this evening. So stay tuned. We'll be back again. It's been a long, rough day for everyone, and I want really on behalf of the government to thank everyone who came out and made a difference in the lives of people in our nation today. Thank you, and God bless.
And let me at this time thank you, Prime Minister, the Honourable Mia Amor Motley, the Minister of Home Affairs, Information and Public Affairs, the Honourable Wilfred Abrams, the Minister of Transport Works and Water Resources, the Honourable Ian Gooding Edgell, and the Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, Dr. the Honourable William Dugade, as well as the Director of the Barbados Met Services, members of the media, and you for joining. Good evening.